And, as you can clearly see from Exhibit 47B, Dr. Zixatal gestured with three of his upper appendages, while his lower ones frantically shuffled through his holophiles. These creatures have absolutely no natural armor whatsoever. No scales, no exoskeleton, not even a decent layer of protective chitin. Just this absurdly thin layer they call skin that tears if you so much as look at it wrong. The members of the Galactic Science Council shifted uncomfortably in their gravity-adjusted seats. Supreme Counselor Nixovith's crystalline form sparkled with anxiety as she leaned forward. But how do they survive? That's what I've been trying to tell you. Dr. Zixatal's voice rose several octaves, causing the telepathic species in attendance to wince. They shouldn't. By every metric we understand, they should have gone extinct millennia ago. Instead, he pulled up another hologram, this one showing various human injury statistics. Oh hey, is that from my medical records? The unexpected voice caused several council members to emit their species equivalent of a startled yelp. Dr. Mei Jiang, the human test subject who was supposed to be quietly observing from the back of the chamber, had somehow materialized next to Dr. Zixatal's presentation platform. Dr. Jiang! Zixatal's scales shifted to a mortified purple. You were instructed to... Yeah, observe quietly, I know. Dr. Jiang waved dismissively while squinting at the hologram. But that's definitely my skateboarding accident from when I was 12. See that fracture pattern? Classic, tried to jump off the garage roof with a homemade parachute injury. The council chamber erupted in horrified whispers. You deliberately jumped from a height. Supreme Counselor Nixovith's crystals had taken on a distinctly pale hue. Well, deliberate might be stretching it. I mean, the parachute was just a bedsheet, so really it was more like controlled falling with style. Dr. Jiang grinned. Only broke 3 bones. Mom was more upset about the sheet, honestly. It was from the good set. Dr. Zixatal frantically pulled up another set of statistics. You see what I'm dealing with? Look at these survival rates. Humans regularly survive things that would instantly terminate any sensible species. Oh, cool. Are those the general Earth statistics? Dr. Jiang peered closer. You should see the numbers from just Florida alone. We had this guy in my hometown who... Dr. Jiang, Zixatal interrupted desperately. Perhaps we could save the anecdotes for the testing phase. Your loss, Jiang shrugged. It involved an alligator, a lawn chair, and a 6-pack of something that definitely wasn't meant for consumption. Classic Tuesday stuff. The council's chief medical officer, a being composed entirely of neural tissue suspended in a protective field, pulsed rapidly. I've analyzed these injury survival statistics 3 times now. They cannot be correct. According to this, humans regularly survive having their protective cavity penetrated by foreign objects. You mean getting stabbed? Yeah, happens all the time. Had a cousin who accidentally got a fence post through his shoulder at his wedding. Still finished the ceremony. Said he wasn't going to waste money on the venue rental. Jiang paused thoughtfully. Though that might have been the shock talking, or the open bar. But how do you function without proper armor? One of the younger council members burst out. Dr. Jiang's grin turned positively wicked. Oh, that's easy. We just walk it off. The entire council stared in silence. I believe, Dr. Zixatal said weakly, this would be an excellent time to move on to my proposed testing protocol. Although, he added, glancing nervously at Dr. Jiang, I'm beginning to fear we may need to revise our safety parameters significantly. Oh, come on, Doc, Jiang's eyes sparkled with mischief. Where's your sense of scientific adventure? I left it behind when you told me about the shopping cart incident, Zixatal muttered, his scales now a distinct shade of trauma green. The Supreme Counselor raised all 4 appendages for attention. I believe we've seen enough to approve immediate testing, though perhaps we should alert the emergency medical team to expand their capabilities. Good call, Jiang nodded sagely. You might want to stock up on coffee too. I tend to get cranky when injured without caffeine. There was this one time in grad school. Moving on, Dr. Zixatal practically shouted, switching to the next hologram with such force he nearly broke the projector. Let us discuss the testing protocols, shall we? The council readily agreed, though several members couldn't help but notice that Dr. Jiang's smile looked suspiciously like what humans called a smirk. They had a sinking feeling their carefully controlled experiments were about to become much more interesting than planned. Test Protocol 1A, Impact Resistance, Dr. Zixatal announced to the observation chamber. his scales a professional shade of blue-grey. "We will begin with a controlled assessment of human resilience to standard gravitational impacts." "You mean you're going to push me down the stairs?" Dr. Zhang translated helpfully, looking far too cheerful for someone about to experience voluntary trauma. "We are not—" "This is a carefully calibrated," Dr. Zixatal sputtered, then took what passed for a deep breath in his species. "We are measuring your species' natural resistance to sudden deceleration events." "Pushing me down the stairs," Zhang nodded sagely. "Got it. Can we hurry this up? The coffee machine in the break room just finished brewing a fresh pot. I can smell it from here." The council members, observing through the safety field, exchanged worried glances. Several made notes about human olfactory capabilities. "Dr. Zhang, please focus on the task at wait, don't you?" But Zhang had already cheerfully hurled herself down the 20-step testing platform. The assembled aliens watched in horror as she bounced, tumbled, and finally landed in an undignified heap at the bottom. 3 medical teams rushed forward, only to freeze as Zhang sat up, brushed herself off, and announced, "Okay, that was fun, but I really need that coffee now. Also, you might want to add some padding to that bottom step. Pretty sure I dented it with my face." Dr. Zixatal's scales had shifted to a peculiar shade of green. You've sustained multiple impacts to your cranial casing. We need to—" Yeah, probably got a concussion," Zhang waved dismissively while checking her nose for bleeding. "Nothing some caffeine and a nap won't fix, though fair warning, last time I had a concussion I spent 3 hours trying to convince my roommate that dolphins were just underwater horses. Might want to fact-check anything I say for the next few hours." The medical teams huddled together, frantically updating their definition of emergency care to include coffee provision. "Test Protocol 2A, temperature resistance," Dr. Zixatal announced several hours later, his voice slightly strained. "We will measure human adaptability to extreme temperature variations in a controlled—" Splash! "Dr. Zhang, you were supposed to wait for the monitoring equipment." Zhang's head popped up from the ice-covered test lake, her grin visible even through chattering teeth. Sorry, Doc. Figured the best data is spontaneous data, right? That water is literally at freezing temperature." "Yep, reminds me of that spring break trip to Lake Michigan. Though at least this time I'm not trying to win a bet involving a rubber duck and 3 bottles of hot sauce." She paddled around cheerfully. "Hey, is the sauna ready yet?" You can't possibly be thinking of using the heat tolerance chamber immediately after—" "Race you there." Zhang hauled herself out of the lake, leaving puddles of freezing water in her wake as she sprinted toward the testing facility's sauna unit. The council's chief medical officer had begun stress pulsing so rapidly that they had to be moved to a specialized containment field. "Test Protocol 3A, chemical processing and toxin resistance," Dr. Zixatal read from his notes, his voice now carrying a distinct note of resignation. "We will begin with— Dr. Zhang, what are you drinking?" Zhang glanced at the container in her hand. "Oh, this, found it under the sink in the break room. Figured it was some kind of alien sports drink. Bit strong on the ammonia taste, but not bad once you get used to it. Kind of reminds me of that experimental moonshine my cousin made in their radiator." The entire room froze. "Dr. Zhang," Zixatal said very, very carefully, "that is industrial strength cleaning fluid." "Huh." Zhang took another sip. "That explains the tingling sensation. And why my tongue is slightly blue. Actually, is it supposed to be blue? Because I'm pretty sure it wasn't this color this morning." 3 different alarm systems activated simultaneously. The medical teams, now well-versed in human Zhang emergencies, simply sighed and began updating their toxicology protocols. "Does this mean we're not doing the actual toxin resistance test?" Zhang asked hopefully. "Because I've got to tell you, after that cleaning fluid, I don't think anything's going to taste worse. Well, except maybe my ex's attempt at cooking, now that was toxic, Supreme Counselor Enixavith, who had been observing the tests, turned to Dr. Zixatal. "Doctor, I believe we need to revise our classification of human durability." "Already done," Zixatal replied faintly, watching as Zhang attempted to convince the medical team that the best treatment for chemical ingestion was hair of the dog. "I've added 16 new categories and 3 previously theoretical survival mechanisms, though I'm beginning to suspect we're less conducting tests and more documenting ways humans shouldn't be able to survive but somehow do anyway." I'd argue with that, Zhang called out, having apparently heard them, but I'm pretty sure I just found out I can taste colors. Did you know security protocols taste purple? That's weird, right? Also, is anyone else's skin vibrating, or is that just me? The medical teams collectively decided that perhaps it was time to implement Protocol "Oh No, Not Again," which mainly consisted of having strong coffee and stronger antidotes on constant standby. Should we proceed with the remaining tests? One of the junior researchers asked nervously. Dr. Zixatal looked at his notes, then at Zhang, who was now trying to explain to the medical team why she felt perfectly fine despite glowing slightly, then back at his notes. I believe, he said with dignity, that in the interest of scientific integrity and my personal sanity, we should take a brief recess, preferably one involving several stiff drinks. Ooh, drinks, Zhang perked up. Just don't let me near anything labeled technically not lethal again. Learned that lesson on my last shore leave, though I did discover I can breathe fire under the right circumstances. The entire research team unanimously decided that some data was better left uncollected. The first indication that something had gone terribly wrong came when the research station's alarm shifted from their usual Dr. Zhang did something inadvisable tone to actual emergency frequency. Dr. Zixatal's scales instantly shifted to alarm purple. Station security reports hostile boarding in progress, the AI announced calmly. Space pirates have breached decks 3 through 7. Please proceed to designated safety zones while trying not to die horribly. Who programmed that AI? Dr. Zhang wondered aloud as the council members and research staff rushed to evacuate. Because I appreciate their style. Dr. Zhang, Zixtal grabbed her with 3 of his arms while using the other 3 to gather critical research data. We must get you to safety immediately. You have no natural armor, and these pirates are notorious for their brutality. Yeah, about that, Zhang was already heading in the opposite direction of the evacuation route. I just remembered the school tour group is still in the xenobiology lab. You know, where we keep all the actually dangerous stuff. But you'll be killed, you're too fragile. Zhang's grin should have been classified as a weapon of mass destruction. Doc, after all these tests, you still don't get it, do you? Humans aren't fragile. We're just really, really bad at staying down. With that, she sprinted off toward the sounds of chaos and destruction. And she's going to get herself killed, one of the junior researchers whimpered. Actually, Zixatal said faintly, I'm beginning to worry about the pirates. The scene in the xenobiology lab was chaos incarnate. 3 pirates, armed with plasma weapons and wearing the latest in illegal combat armor, had cornered a group of alien children and their teachers. The pirates had assumed their greatest obstacle would be the lab's security systems. They weren't expecting a human to crash through the ceiling vent, landing on the leader with what could only be described as malicious glee. You know, Zhang commented conversationally while using the unconscious pirate as impromptu cover, I always wanted to do a superhero entrance, though I think I might have broken something. Anyone hear a crack? Because I definitely heard a crack. The remaining pirates stared in shock as Zhang stood up, her left arm hanging at a distinctly wrong angle. Oh yeah, that's definitely broken, she nodded. Anyway, who's next? The pirates opened fire. Zhang dove behind a lab bench, pulling 2 of the children with her. Okay, kids, pop quiz. What's the first rule of lab safety? Don't drink anything Dr. Zhang hasn't tested first, one of the children suggested. That's oddly specific, but fair. No, it's know where all the emergency chemical showers are, like that one right above our pirate friends there. The children's eyes widened in understanding. 3 seconds and 1 pulled emergency shower later, the pirates found themselves drenched in freezing decontamination foam. Zhang used their moment of confusion to tackle the nearest one, using her good arm to deliver what she would later describe as percussive diplomacy. Hold still, the remaining pirate snarled, trying to get a clear shot. Why won't you just die like a normal, fragile species? First off, rude, Zhang replied, ducking under a plasma bolt that left a glowing hole in the wall. Second, actually, hang on, is something burning? Everyone paused to sniff the air. Oh right, plasma weapons plus volatile lab chemicals equals... Zhang grabbed the nearest fire extinguisher with her good arm. Everyone out! Field trip time! She herded the children toward the exit as the first explosion rocked the lab. A plasma bolt caught her in the shoulder, spinning her around, but not stopping her forward momentum. Okay, that's going to leave a mark, she muttered, then raised her voice. Single file line, please. Yes, just like your regular evacuation drills, except with more explosions. Think of it as an exciting hands-on lesson in exothermic reactions. Another shot caught her in the leg just as the last child made it through the door. Zhang stumbled, caught herself, and turned to face the remaining pirate, with what could only be described as mild annoyance. "Really?" she asked, absently patting out a small fire on her lab coat. "I'm trying to teach here. This is a place of learning." She punctuated this statement by throwing the fire extinguisher with frightening accuracy. The security teams found them 10 minutes later. The lab was partially on fire, completely flooded with foam, and somehow seemed to be generating its own localized weather system. The pirates were unconscious, thoroughly zip-tied, and had "messed with the wrong scientist" written on their foreheads in what appeared to be permanent marker. Dr. Zhang sat in the middle of it all, using her good arm to hold an emergency pressure bandage against her shoulder, while cheerfully explaining to the children why they should never try what she just did. "And that's why we always keep spare zip ties in the lab," she was saying. "Also remember, kids, violence should never be your first solution. It should be like third or fourth minimum, after coffee." "Dr. Zhang!" Zixtal burst onto the scene, his scales cycling through so many colors he looked like a disco ball. "You're injured. You're shot. You're on fire." "Only a little bit on fire," Zhang corrected, finally noticing her lab coat was still smoldering. "And I've had worse. Did I ever tell you about the time I tried to deep fry a turkey? Now that was a disaster. This is just Tuesday. You have multiple plasma burns, a broken arm, and according to these readings, enough adrenaline in your system to kill a small moon." "Yeah, I'm probably going to feel that tomorrow," Zhang agreed cheerfully. "But hey, got some great data on human emergency responses, right? That's got to count for something." One of the children raised their appendage. "Dr. Zhang, is this going to be on the test?" "Absolutely not, but if anyone asks, we'll call it a practical demonstration of human biochemistry and emergency protocols." She tried to stand up, wobbled slightly, and sat back down. "Though maybe we should finish the lesson after I visit medical. I'm starting to taste colors again, and I don't think it's from drinking cleaning fluid this time." "The medical team is already on their way," Zixatal assured her, trying to prevent her from moving. "Along with a trauma team, a psychiatric evaluation unit, and I believe someone called in an exorcist, just to be thorough." "Oh, you guys do care," Zhang grinned, then looked thoughtful. "Hey, do you think this counts as extra credit for my durability tests? Because I feel like surviving multiple plasma shots should get me bonus points." Zixatal stared at her in disbelief. You just, how are you even conscious?" "Spite, mostly, and I haven't had my afternoon coffee yet." She perked up as the medical team arrived. "Hey, speaking of which, any chance we could stop by the break room on the way to medical? I'm pretty sure I've earned a coffee break." "You're literally bleeding." "Yeah, but like not fatally." She paused. "Probably. Hard to tell with plasma burns. Everything kind of just feels tingly at this point." As the medical team carefully loaded her onto a hover stretcher after 3 failed attempts to convince her to stop moving, Zhang called out to the still-stunned security team, "Oh, and someone might want to check on that weather system forming in the lab. Pretty sure mixing plasma fire with decontamination foam isn't covered in the standard safety protocols." The last thing Dr. Zixatal heard before the medical team whisked her away was her cheerful voice saying, "So hypothetically, if someone happened to have used classified research equipment as impromptu weapons, would that count as misuse of lab resources or creative problem-solving?" The security team looked at the devastation, then at the thoroughly defeated pirates, then at each other. "I vote we classify this entire incident under reasons not to underestimate unarmored species," one suggested. "Agreed," said another, "though maybe we should add a subcategory for, especially if they're human and haven't had their coffee." Dr. Zixtal just sighed and began updating his research notes. He had a feeling the council was going to need an entirely new classification system after this. "Esteemed members of the council," Dr. Zixatal began, his scales set to what he hoped was a professional shade of blue-grey, though they kept threatening to shift to trauma purple whenever he glanced at his notes. "I present my updated findings on human durability, or as I've come to think of it, why everything we thought we knew about survival mechanisms is wrong." He pulled up a holoscreen, carefully not looking at the back of the chamber where Dr. Zhang sat with her arm in a cast that she'd already covered in what she called doodles, and what the medical staff called anatomically improbable xenobiology sketches. First, let us address what we previously considered evolutionary disadvantages. Humans lacked natural armor not because they failed to evolve it, but because they simply never needed it. They are, to put it in technical terms, biological tanks wearing meat suits. "Oh, thanks, Doc," Zhang called out. "That's the nicest thing anyone said about my meat suit since that time I got called suspiciously durable by emergency room staff." Zixatal's scales flickered briefly to distress orange before he managed to continue. "The average human possesses what can only be described as a suite of biological superpowers that render traditional protective evolution redundant. These include, but are horrifyingly not limited to." He began listing them off, each point appearing in holographic form. Extreme endurance. Humans can continue functioning long after sustaining injuries that would incapacitate most species, as demonstrated by Dr. Zhang's insistence on finishing the tour despite multiple plasma burns and a compound fracture. "The kids had questions," Zhang protested. "You can't just leave educational opportunities hanging." Enhanced regeneration. Their healing capabilities border on the miraculous. They can regrow significant amounts of tissue, repair broken bones, and even regain limited organ function. "Oh yeah, livers are wild," Zhang nodded enthusiastically. "My uncle lost like 70% of his in a thing with a lawnmower and a flamingo, but it grew back. Doctor said they'd never seen anyone so cheerful about traumatic yard maintenance incidents." Zixatal's scales went through several colors before settling on a resigned taupe. "Unprecedented pain tolerance. Humans can and will continue functioning through levels of pain that would render most species comatose." "To be fair," Zhang interjected, "a lot of that is just spite. And coffee. Speaking of which." She raised her non-casted arm, showing an empty cup. "Dr. Zhang, that's your 8th cup today." "Yeah, but I lost at least 3 cups worth of blood yesterday, so I'm just maintaining balance. It's science." Several council members made hurried notes about human caffeine dependency, while others simply stared in horror. "Moving on," Zixatal said desperately. "We've also documented extraordinary temperature adaptation, toxin resistance that borders on the absurd, and what can only be described as selective immortality through sheer stubbornness." He pulled up a new chart. "This brings us to perhaps the most disturbing finding. Humans appear to be largely unaware of their own durability. They regularly survive situations that should be fatal, then dismiss these incidents as, quote, just another Tuesday." "Are you still hung up on the ceiling vent thing?" Zhang asked. "Because I keep telling you that was a totally valid tactical decision. Plus, I'd always wanted to try that entrance since I was a kid and saw it in a movie." "You fell 3 decks. "Exactly. Much more efficient than taking the stairs." The Supreme Councillor's crystals were pulsing with concern. "Dr. Zixatal, are you suggesting that humans regularly survive potentially fatal incidents for fun?" "Oh man, wait until you hear about my childhood." Zhang perked up. "This one time, my brother and I decided to test if umbrellas could work as parachutes." "Dr. Zhang," Zixatal interrupted quickly, "perhaps we could save the recreational near-death experiences for the appendix." "Spoil sport. Fine, but you're missing out on a great story about 2 trash can lids, a shopping cart, and what we thought was a reasonable approximation of a rocket engine." Several council members began stress-molting. "In conclusion," Zixatal said loudly, "I recommend we immediately reclassify humans as Class X resilient organisms, with the subclassification of reality-adjacent survival capabilities. Furthermore, I suggest we update all first contact protocols to include the warning, do not assume injury, blood loss, broken bones, or apparent death will stop them, especially if they haven't had their coffee. Also, maybe add a note about not touching their coffee," one of the junior researchers suggested, still traumatized from the caffeine incident. "Just trust me on this one." Additional suggestions include never assuming they're out of the fight just because they appear to be dead, severely injured, or on fire. Sometimes they're all 3 and still completing mission objectives while making terrible puns. "That's just multitasking," Zhang commented. "Also, my puns are amazing, thank you very much." "Finally," Zixatal concluded, his scales settling into a color that could only be described as seen too much, "I recommend we create an entirely new research division dedicated to figuring out why humans are like this, preferably staffed entirely by therapists." "Second," called out every researcher who had witnessed the tests. "Motion carried," the Supreme Councillor declared. though perhaps we should wait until Dr. Zhang's arm has healed before. Oh, this? Zhang waved her cast. Doc cleared me this morning. Apparently my spite-based healing factor is off the charts. Anyone want to help me test if I can do that ceiling vent entrance with just one arm? The entire council chamber erupted in unanimous protest. Your species, Zixatal said with feeling, is terrifying. Oh, thanks, Zhang beamed. Want to hear about the time I tried to teach myself parkour in a hospital while concussed? The sound of multiple beings stress-molting filled the chamber. The final council session regarding human classification ended exactly as Dr. Zixatal had feared it would, with multiple safety violations and at least one small fire. By unanimous vote, Supreme Councillor Nixavith announced, her crystal still slightly pale from the morning's demonstration of human parkour, which the medical team had retrospectively classified as deliberately defying physics while laughing at gravity. We hereby classify humans as Class X biological tanks, with the subclassification of accidentally immortal through sheer audacity. We should also, added the chief medical officer, who had developed a nervous pulse flutter over the past few weeks, append the standard safety warning. The new galaxy-wide advisory flashed across all screens. Warning, never assume a human is incapacitated. They are probably fine and will be extremely annoyed if you interrupt their activity due to minor issues such as massive blood loss, multiple fractures, or being technically dead for a few minutes. I object to the word technically, Dr. Zhang called out from where she was attempting to balance on one hand despite her recently healed arm. It implies there's some sort of debate about the death part. I mean, you're either dead or you're not, right? Unless you're only mostly dead, which according to at least one human documentary is distinctly different from all dead. Dr. Zhang, Zixatal said wearily, please get down from there before you... Crash. Fall through the decorative ceiling panel and into the artificial gravity generator. He sighed, his scales shifting to a color that could only be described as, this might as well happen. Again. Zhang's voice echoed up from the new hole in the floor. I'm okay, though someone might want to check on the gravity generator. It's making a weird humming sound that I'm pretty sure isn't standard. Also, unrelated question, is anyone else suddenly feeling lighter? The council chamber's gravity chose that moment to reduce by approximately 60%. This seems like a great opportunity for additional testing, Zhang's cheerful voice announced as she began bouncing off the walls, literally. Hey Doc, do your durability metrics account for variable gravity conditions? Because I have some theories I'd like to test. As the council members frantically tried to restore normal gravity, while preventing Dr. Zhang from conducting impromptu zero-G experiments, Dr. Zixatal made one final entry in his research logs. Conclusion, humans developed without natural armor not due to evolutionary oversight, but because nothing the universe could develop would be as effective as their built-in ability to treat near-death experiences as minor inconveniences and potentially fatal situations as fun opportunities for science. May whatever higher powers exist help anyone who assumes they're fragile. He paused, then added, personal addendum, next research project. Why do humans become exponentially more dangerous when they're supposedly injured? And who taught them to see their own mortality as more of a polite suggestion than a hard rule? Speaking of suggestions, Zhang called out as she executed what she claimed was a perfectly reasonable microgravity backflip. Anyone want to help me test if the emergency escape pods can be used as impromptu racing vehicles? The sound of multiple beings stress-molting in zero gravity filled the chamber.